You know what's wild? Right now, someone in your neighborhood just drove past in a $60,000 truck. They're heading to their job where they make $55,000 a year. And somehow, this doesn't seem strange to anyone anymore. I'm not exaggerating for effect here. I've watched this exact pattern repeat itself thousands of times over my career in banking. The numbers I'm about to share with you aren't hypothetical. They're the actual financial reality of the average American adult. And honestly, they're worse than most people realize. My name is Jonathan, and after decades in banking, I've seen the internal numbers that most people never get to see. The real balance sheet, the actual debt loads, the retirement accounts that should be funding golden years but couldn't fund a golden weekend. Here's the thing. You can't fix what you don't measure. And most people are operating with a completely distorted view of what normal financial behavior actually looks like. Stick with me here because by the end of this, you're going to understand exactly where the average person stands financially. And more importantly, you're going to know precisely how to make sure you don't end up in the same position. Let's start with the foundation, what people actually earn. The median full-time worker in this country brings home about $1,100 per week. That works out to roughly $57,000 annually before taxes touch it. Now, here's what most people don't realize. That $57,000 is a gross fiction. It's the number that exists before reality kicks in. After federal taxes, state taxes, Social Security, and Medicare finish carving out their pieces, that $57,000 shrinks down to somewhere between $40,000 and $44,000 in actual spending power. Think about that mathematical gap for a second. The typical worker is trying to navigate modern American life on $44,000 of real money. And look, I've seen both approaches to this reality play out countless times. Some people understand that their paycheck is just raw material, a resource to deploy strategically. But most people, they treat their gross income as permission to spend, then wonder why the math never quite works out at the end of the month. This is where the real financial story begins, because what matters isn't the number on your pay stub. It's the gap between what arrives and what leaves. The Federal Reserve publishes data that should genuinely disturb anyone planning to stop working someday. The median retirement account balance across all working adults, $65,000. Let me put that in perspective. At a safe 4% withdrawal rate, which is what most financial professionals recommend to avoid running out of money, $65,000 generates about $2,600 per year. That's $217 per month. Try this thought experiment. Could you maintain anything close to your current lifestyle on $217 a month? Even if your house is paid off and you have zero debt, that wouldn't cover your electric bill and groceries. But here's where it gets really interesting. That $65,000 median is actually generous compared to what a huge chunk of the population has saved. About 25% of working adults have exactly $0 in retirement accounts. Not a little bit, zero. 1 in 4 people you pass on the street is planning their retirement around the hope that Social Security will somehow cover everything. That's not a retirement strategy, that's financial magical thinking. Now, you might be thinking, well, maybe those are young people who just haven't started saving yet. Look, I wish that were true, but the numbers tell a different story. Adults in their 50s, people who should be in peak saving years, have a median retirement balance around $120,000. Using that same 4% rule, that's $4,800 per year, $400 per month to live on. And we're talking about the median here, which means half of people in their 50s have less than that. Since so many people are effectively betting their entire retirement on government benefits, let's talk about what that actually means in practice. The Social Security Administration reports that the average monthly benefit comes in around $1,700. That's roughly $20,400 annually. Here's the thing, that might sound manageable until you start running the actual numbers on what life costs. Housing, utilities, food, healthcare, transportation, and basic maintenance. If you worked sporadically throughout your career or earned below average wages, your benefit drops significantly below that average. And we're not even addressing the structural issues with the program itself. The trust fund is projected to run short within the next decade or so, which means benefits could be reduced unless Congress acts. Personally, I've always advised people to plan assuming Social Security won't exist when they retire, then treat any eventual benefit as bonus money. That might seem pessimistic, but it's probably the more realistic framework given what we're actually seeing. The Bureau of Labor Statistics tracks household spending with uncomfortable precision. The average household burns through about $6,100 monthly, roughly $73,000 per year. Now, let's do some basic math here. If you're spending $73,000 annually, you need to clear at least that much after taxes just to break even. No savings, no investments, no financial progress whatsoever. Just maintaining the status quo. The largest single expense, housing at $2,000 monthly. Over $24,000 annually just for shelter. And if you live anywhere near a major city, you're probably thinking that number sounds absurdly low. Food takes another $750 monthly between groceries and restaurants. That's over $9,000 yearly just to eat. Transportation adds nearly $1,000 monthly. About $12,000 annually for vehicles, insurance, fuel, and maintenance. Here's what strikes me about these numbers. Housing and transportation alone consume $3,000 monthly before you've spent a single dollar on anything else. No healthcare, no utilities, no entertainment, no clothing, nothing. This is the financial treadmill most people are running on, and they don't even realize it. According to Experian, the average FICO score sits at 715, which falls into good territory on the 300 to 850 scale. That number suggests most people are handling credit reasonably well, but averages conceal the chaos at the extremes. Plenty of people are walking around with scores in the 500s and 600s, wondering why every loan application gets rejected or comes back with punishing interest rates. Look, your credit score isn't just some abstract number. It's a key that either opens or closes financial doors throughout your entire life. The difference between a 620 score and a 760 score can mean tens of thousands of dollars in additional interest paid over the life of a mortgage. The formula for maintaining decent credit isn't complicated. Pay bills when there's due, keep credit card balances low relative to your limits, don't open new accounts every time a store clerk offers you 10% off. Yet somehow, a substantial portion of the population manages to mess this up year after year. This is where the financial report card gets genuinely ugly. The average household carries $7,200 in credit card debt. Let me emphasize what that represents. This isn't a mortgage on an appreciating asset or a car loan for necessary transportation. This is $7,200 spent on consumables, items that are either already in landfills or gathering dust in closets. The real damage comes from the interest rates. Credit cards typically charge between 18% and 25%. At 20% interest on $7,200, you're hemorrhaging $1,440 annually just in interest payments. Money that produces zero value and builds zero wealth. Here's what most people don't realize: that interest is working against you with the same power that compound returns could be working for you. It's the exact inverse of building wealth. I've seen this pattern countless times. One approach is treating credit cards as a convenient transaction tool, paying the full balance every month. The other approach is carrying a balance, telling yourself you'll pay it off eventually while the interest compounds quietly in the background. Most credit card debt doesn't come from emergencies. It comes from routine consumption: clothes, electronics, restaurant meals, online purchases that seemed reasonable in the moment but accumulated into financial quicksand over time. The solution is straightforward, even if implementing it requires actual discipline. Pay the full balance monthly. If you can't afford something with cash, don't charge it unless it's a genuine emergency. And if you're already carrying debt, eliminating it should be your absolute top financial priority. There's no rational justification for earning 7% returns in an investment account while simultaneously paying 20% on credit card balances. That math doesn't work in any universe. Net worth is probably the single most useful metric for measuring overall financial health. The calculation is simple: total assets minus total liabilities. Add up everything you own: home equity, vehicles, bank accounts, retirement savings. Subtract everything you owe: mortgage, credit cards, student loans, car loans. Whatever remains is your net worth. The Federal Reserve reports the median household net worth sits at approximately $192,000. But like everything else we've discussed, this varies dramatically by age. Under 35, the median drops to around $39,000. If you're 25 and just starting your career, $39,000 isn't terrible. But if you're 34 and still sitting at that number, your financial trajectory needs serious recalibration. The 35 to 44 bracket reaches about $135,000. The 45 to 54 group hits $247,000. Between 55 and 64, the median climbs to $364,000. Now, here's what strikes me about these numbers. They're actually achievable for most people earning decent incomes and exercising basic discipline. You don't need exceptional intelligence or entrepreneurial genius to hit these milestones. You just need to consistently spend less than you earn and invest the difference intelligently over time. But here's the uncomfortable truth: most people don't do this. They get close to these numbers through home equity and employer retirement contributions, not through intentional wealth building behavior. The Bureau of Economic Analysis shows Americans save roughly 3.7% of their disposable income. Let me repeat that: 3.7%. That's the gap between income and consumption for the typical household. Think about what that means practically. If you're saving less than 4% of your income, and some of that needs to fund shorter term goals, vehicle purchases, home repairs, weddings, How much actually flows into long-term wealth building? The average home down payment is now $67,000. A typical kitchen renovation costs $28,000. A new vehicle averages over $48,000. If you're only setting aside 3.7% of your income and these shorter-term goals are competing for those dollars, your retirement funding is getting squeezed down to almost nothing. Most financial professionals suggest dedicating at least 15% of income specifically toward retirement, separate from other savings goals. And if you want to retire before age 70 with any kind of comfortable lifestyle, you'll probably need to save even more aggressively than that. This is where it gets really interesting. The gap between what people should be saving and what they actually are saving represents the difference between financial security and financial stress in retirement. When do you imagine most people stop working? If you guessed 65, you're in the ballpark but not quite accurate. Recent data shows the average retirement age is 62. Now, that might sound appealing at first. Who wouldn't want to stop working at 62? But here's the complication. Full Social Security benefits don't kick in until age 67 for most people currently in the workforce. So if you retire at 62, you're somehow bridging a 5-year gap. And if your retirement savings resemble those median numbers we discussed earlier, maybe $120,000 if you're lucky, those 5 years are going to be extremely lean. Think about this timeline carefully. Start working at 22, retire at 62. That's 40 years in the workforce. 4 full decades of commutes, meetings, deadlines, and whatever else your job entails. After all that time, you retire with perhaps $120,000 in savings, which generates roughly $400 monthly using safe withdrawal rates, plus Social Security that doesn't start for another 5 years. Does that sound like a good deal to you? Because from where I'm sitting, it sounds like a raw deal disguised as normal. The Social Security Administration estimates that someone reaching 65 can expect to live another 20 years on average. Retiring at 62 means potentially funding 23 years or more of retirement. 23 years is longer than most people's entire career up to that point. And here's the question that should genuinely concern you. How many of those 23 years will you actually be healthy enough to enjoy? At 62, you're probably still in reasonable shape. But what about at 72 or 82? Time compounds not just in your investment accounts, but in your physical capacity as well. These statistics aren't just random data points, they reveal a pattern. And the pattern shows that the average person's approach to money fundamentally doesn't work. When the typical American has less than $120,000 saved for retirement while carrying $7,200 in credit card debt, something is seriously broken in the system. When people are spending 96% of everything they earn and wondering why they can't get ahead, the problem isn't mysterious. It's mathematical. But here's the opportunity hidden inside these uncomfortable numbers. Once you understand what average looks like, it becomes crystal clear how to do better than average. And doing better doesn't require secret knowledge or exceptional circumstances. Look, if you're consistently saving more than 4% of your income, you're already outpacing most people. If you're avoiding credit card debt, you're way ahead of the curve. If you understand your investments and contribute regularly to retirement accounts, you're lapping the competition. The reality is that beating these statistics doesn't require extraordinary income or inherited wealth. It requires being slightly more intentional about money than the average person. And honestly, that bar is set remarkably low. Consider this carefully. If the average household spends $6,100 monthly and you figure out how to live comfortably on $5,000, you've just freed up $13,200 annually for savings and investments. Sustain that consistently for 3 decades and you'll end up in a completely different financial universe than your peers. What strikes me most about these statistics is the massive disconnect between what people claim they want and what their behavior reveals. Everyone says they want financial security. Everyone says they want comfortable retirement. Everyone says they want to stop worrying about money, but the average person's actions don't align with these stated goals at all. Maybe that's because most people don't actually know what average looks like. Maybe they assume everyone else has their financial act together, so they feel no urgency to change their own patterns, or maybe they recognize they should be doing better but don't know where to start, or they've convinced themselves it's too late to make a meaningful difference. If these statistics hit uncomfortably close to home, don't spiral into panic. The fact that you're here right now, actively learning about money and trying to understand your financial position, already puts you ahead of most people. The majority never even take the time to figure out where they stand or what needs to change. The key is using these numbers as motivation, not as justification for giving up. If you're 35 with less than $40,000 in net worth, that doesn't condemn you to financial mediocrity. It means you have work to do, but you also have 30 plus years to get it right. And if you're already outperforming these averages in some areas, don't let that success breed complacency. Maybe you have a solid credit score and no credit card debt, but your retirement savings are behind. Or perhaps you're excellent at saving, but keeping everything in a checking account. earning practically nothing instead of investing for growth. These financial statistics should be eye-opening, but they should also be empowering. When you know what normal looks like, you can make informed decisions about whether you want to be normal or whether you want something substantially better. Here's what I think. You deserve better than retiring at 62 with $120,000 and hoping Social Security doesn't collapse before you need it. You deserve better than carrying credit card debt and spending every dollar you earn. You deserve the peace of mind that comes with having your financial foundation solidly built. These statistics show us where the average person ends up, but they absolutely do not have to define where you end up. Use them as a warning, not a destination. Because once you understand what most people are doing with their money, it becomes remarkably clear how to do something different and achieve substantially better results. Here's the thing. Building wealth really is like pushing a boulder up a hill. The beginning is brutal and exhausting, but once you stop making the invisible mistakes that everyone else is making, once you establish different patterns around saving, spending, and investing, momentum takes over in ways that seem almost magical. The choice is entirely yours. You can follow the average path and end up with average results, $120,000 at retirement, credit card debt, living on $400 a month, plus whatever Social Security provides. Or you can recognize these patterns for what they are, adjust your approach, and build something substantially better. The statistics are what they are. They're not going to change just because we find them uncomfortable. But your personal financial story, that's still being written, and you're holding the pen. Start by saving more than 4%. Eliminate your credit card debt completely. Invest consistently in low-cost index funds. Live below your means even when your income increases. Do these things consistently over time, and you'll end up somewhere completely different than where these statistics predict. The numbers don't lie. The average person is heading toward a financial reality that bears little resemblance to their expectations. But average is a choice, and you can choose differently starting right now.